talk about small wins and people trying things that are new that enable them to pursue these four-way wins. And yet, small is a relative term,
yes.
right? So small can be, I'm not going to be, checking my cell phone. I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to shut off my BlackBerry during dinner, when I'm at home with my family. But it can also be taking a month off and studying Italian in Bologna, which is something that you did
yes.
this last year. So I think of that as an experiment that is actually pretty big in scope, and yet it was something that you were able to do and that has changed you in some important ways and probably created greater value for the company in some way. Or has it?
Well, I hope so. I have to tell you.
Tell me about that. How did you do that?
Well, it was definitely one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my career. And I'd have to say that despite the fact that I have a senior role at the firm, it did take a lot of planning and I would say ultimately courage, to walk in and ask for that month off.
All right, so what exactly did you do? Start from the top.
So I had an opportunity to go back to the same school I studied at when I was a junior in college in Bologna, Italy, and continue some language studies, which I frankly just dreamed of doing. And I had an opportunity to do it in the fall of 2007, and first went and talked to my husband. Would he support?
Key
stakeholder, my husband, would he hold the family together in its entirety? Because he is a 50-50 manager, as it is. But would he take over my piece and manage it while I was away? And he was, incredibly supportive.
What was in it for him, Ann?
Me being happy. I really think that he cared that I could, it sounds almost silly, but he really knew that this was a dream. And I just celebrated 20 years on Wall Street, 10 years with the same firm. And if there was a time, the time was now. And sometimes people even in my community ask me, well, why are you doing this? Why now? And I would just
look... Your community at home?
At home, my family, the soccer moms, and they're like, why are you going now? And I remember looking at them, and the answer that came out was, because I can. And I achieved a certain level of success at work. I put together and was, resourced with an incredible team. So I had the opportunity to delegate to the team. My family was in a place where my kids were settled in a new school after moving 2 years ago. And there was no immediate crisis looming. And in our lives, we also often have this excuse, well, I'm about to get promoted. I'm about to have a baby. My husband is a new job. There's always an excuse. And I have to say there was no excuse in the system. So I figured I had to take advantage of this window. So the next step was to go to leadership at Lehman, and I had to go to my boss and really just look at him and say, is it possible that I could, I actually said to him, I have a question I'm seeking your support on. And I remember him looking at me and going, done. And I'm like, no, this is a big one. You need to listen to this.
Wait, done before you even said what the proposal was?
Even before I asked what the proposal was.
So you've already obviously earned a great deal of trust and respect from him.
And I think, that's the time in your career when you reach certain levels of comfort in the roles that you're in. That's a great time to kind of venture out and do an experiment.
So what was in it for him?
Well, I think, clearly retention. There was no threat of me leaving, but I think the notion was that if I could rejuvenate and replenish, in something that was meaningful, why not? A month in the scheme of 10 years of a career isn't that meaningful. And the time I was asking to leave was also a window in which there wasn't critical work that needed to be done.
I see.
And so he was fully supportive. And I have to say, Lehman Brothers also has a sabbatical policy that very few people take advantage of.
Right. So you wanted to be a role model for taking advantage of a policy that enabled you to do this. So what's been the effect? How's it affected you? How's it affected your business, your family, your friends' network?
Well, for me now, I mean,
aside from your fluency in Italian now, I'm sure you must be amazing in the language itself, but there's a lot more than that.
Well, beyond being starry-eyed about having the opportunity, I think in planning to go away, I had to do an unbelievable amount of delegation. And I think in one of the areas I needed to grow in as a leader was to delegate to my team so that I could take on more responsibilities at a more strategic level. So I spent really the previous 3 months, starting in June, really delegating much of the work that I was doing day to day to my key senior leaders on my team.
So this was leadership development for you.
Absolutely. And in fact, while I was away, things ran so smoothly that I did have a couple of moments of complete insecurity.
They don't need me anymore.
They don't need me. And in fact, they didn't. They really were able to.
But that's what you want, right?
Absolutely. And it also, for me personally, so one, I was able to delegate and empower my team. For me personally, and also you realize that you are dispensable. And no one has said that to me, but when you go away and you realize that it does run without you, it also gives you a sense of when you're there at 11 o'clock at night and you decide, I have to get this done because I'm going to save the world, it's not just you. And I think often many of us sit in our seats.
It's not just, you have other people who can step up.
We don't bear the world on our shoulders. There is, we all are empowered with teams or have colleagues with whom we need to get work done. But, it's not just you that's needed in a large company.
So what other effects did it have on not just your team, but the rest of your life?
Well, I think, first of all, it was the first time in 20 years that I was alone. And I think from that perspective, it was a great, just introspective period for me to kind of take stock of what's gone well and what needs to be worked on. It was the first time I was back in school. So, I'm a great learner. I love to be a constant learner. And I indulged. So that was fabulous. And just to be away was just very refreshing. In terms of my family, I think they appreciated very much sort of the value add that I add to the team at home.
Absence made the heart grow fonder?
Absolutely. Even my 16-year-old daughter, when she wrote me one email in 30 days and says, I miss your salad, I think she kind of got...
Dad's salad wasn't cutting it?
Yeah, Dad's salad wasn't cutting it, and I think she got that it goes beyond, me hammering on her every day to get her homework done. So that was very nice. And I think at work, other people said to me that they were inspired to kind of rethink and maybe be a little more forward with how they may want to take a small experiment and adjust their lives a little bit. And that's very rewarding.
So your model here enables other people to try stuff like this.
I think that's the idea.
Just thinking about other people who want to try different ways of doing things that are good for them, good for their families, good for their communities, good for their business. That that question basic assumptions about how things get done, and they haven't yet earned the trust and respect that you have. How would you advise them?
Well, I think there are experiments to do at every step of your career, and you really need to be self-aware as to how much you can ask for at any one time. Just to give you a sense, too, in 1999, I had a 3-year-old son and a 11-year-old daughter, and a daughter who had significant learning disabilities, and a son who grabbed my leg as I dragged out the door. And at that time, I went to management and asked for a flexible work week, and that was, I think, even bigger than a month off. But at the time, it actually seemed like the only way I was going to stay in the game. I think you need to know where you are in your life, where you are in your career. Take stock of what the ask is versus what your employer, what your colleague, what your partner gets back, and really lay it out like a business proposition. What are the pros? What are the cons? And if it seems big, maybe just tweak it and start small. Maybe it's working at home, for example, once a week, once a month. Or maybe it's holding a virtual team meeting, once a month. Maybe it's volunteering at your children's school and leaving early. But you need to figure out what's important to you, and then what does that mean? What are the costs to the organization, and how are you going to kind of make that up?
Well, even better, and what I try to promote, both in the book and in my classes and coaching, is how's this actually going to benefit the business? How's this going to make you not only more productive, more focused, less distracted, but perhaps better connected in the community, or drawing on some other talents and developing them, or forcing you to develop other aspects of your leadership capacity. As your wonderful example attests, you had to stretch in terms of your capacity to delegate, right? So not just no cost, but actually a benefit.
A benefit. Absolutely. And I think, to your point, even sometimes someone wants to join a philanthropic board.
Yes.
There's tremendous opportunities to network, in the business community. And I think those type of benefits are sometimes much broader than people initially think. But the key is to really be able to articulate them.
Yes. And in order to be able to do that, you have to know what those other people actually need from you and how such a change might be beneficial to them.
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
that's one of the things that I found to be really critical. Like when you're making the case, it's got to be from the point of view of the other person, not just what you need, what you want for your family, for whatever matters to you, but how's this actually going to benefit the other person, or your clients, your colleagues.
It's the proverbial win-win. You've got to present the win-win.
Indeed, and that requires some forethought and some real consideration of what it's like for the person on the other side of the table.
Absolutely.
So, thinking about the future of leadership at Lehman, I think we're starting to run out of time here, and I want to make sure we get to this. How you think about the next 10, 15 years? What's going to be most critical for success in your firm from a people point of view?
Well, I think from a people point of view is to really recognize that the paradigm that we've managed for the last 20 years is changing. Technology is enabling us to do work 24/7. Global markets are allowing us to hand work off to different time periods during the course of the day, from New York to Tokyo to Mumbai to London. To understand that Gen Y, as they enter the workforce, are looking for a different value proposition in terms of what they want to get out of work every day. I really think it's important for managers to understand that the workforce is more non-traditional than traditional, and we need to up our skills to understand that employees need to have some flexibility in terms of...
You really think people don't get that today?
You know what? When you're in the heat of a deal, when you're in the heat of a trade, when you're working on a project, you are focused on getting things done.
Yes.
And I think that may not be the front of your mind.
Of course not.
So I think what people just need to be cognizant of is when you're not in the heat of the deal, those are the periods to give people the flexibility that they need to get their life's work done, so that when work calls, they're fully engaged, fully available. So even just giving up on the margins can make a huge difference in terms of people's commitment. People are just expending unbelievable amounts of energy and working incredibly long hours that there comes a point of diminishing returns. And I think we as leaders need to continue to think about how we're going to continue to build resilience on our teams, because we're dealing in human capital. And we have to preserve and amortize that capital, more carefully.
Yeah, well, certainly what I've found is that you give people a greater sense of control over their lives, and they're able to bounce back. They're able to withstand the pressures more when it's their choice as to the who, the what, and the when of how things get done.